Now, I don't want to freak you guys out or anything, but you can probably actually run a new game. You don't even need a graphics card. Now, Total War Warhammer 3 is coming out on February 17th, and it's also going to be free to anybody who has Game Pass. And to be honest, you can actually get Game Pass if you don't have it for usually $1. Sometimes you can even get like a 3 months for $1 deal. So anyway, here's a game that most of you can actually play on your system, even in the current graphics card market, and it might only cost you $1, or, free if you're already paying for Game Pass. Anyway, what do I mean? You don't even need a graphics card. Well, the minimum GPU includes an Intel Iris Xe graphics. Now, keep in mind that the Iris Xe graphics are like the latest and greatest in Intel's integrated graphics chips. So this doesn't mean you can have some like really old integrated processor, but hey, that's good news. And the other low-end graphics cards here are GTX 900 or RX 400 series. They're not even picking a specific graphics card. Now, I think what that tells me here, when we get into the big question in the room is, okay, run it, but at what settings and frame rate? I think they mean like, you can turn the game on and it'll maybe be at, a really low resolution, probably not even 1080p, and probably on the extremely low settings. But that's just my speculation. But here's the thing, the recommended graphics card jumps all the way up to a GTX 1660 Ti or an AMD RX 5600 XT. Now a 1660 Ti, if you're not familiar with that, is very similar in performance to a GTX 1070. And I'll just pull up a relative performance chart so we can get an idea of what we're looking at here. So the recommended GPU here, 1660 Ti on Tech Power-Up's relative performance chart, which is based on when they review GPUs, they then kind of put them all against each other into a big chart. And since these reviews are done at different times and might be using different games, this isn't perfect. But it's a very good ballpark figure that I found to be pretty accurate most of the time. Anyway, so if you're on like a 1660, you are falling short of that recommendation. You're at about like 87%. You can find your GPU somewhere on here, right? If we're scrolling up, a 1650 Super is only 78% of the recommended. We see, a GTX 1060, which I'll probably test out in this game when the game comes out, because it's on Game Pass, so I might as well, right? And I have a 1060 I can test out. That should be getting 74% of this recommended GPU's performance. But, as we scroll up here and you see, 970 at 68%, you can find your card on here. The 1650 is, a lot weaker than a 1660 Ti. But, like, what does that mean? What resolution and frame rate is this targeting? Now, all I can do is speculate because, they didn't tell us in the additional notes or anything. But I think that it's going to be targeting 1080p 60 FPS at high or even maxed out settings. Now, one reason why I say that is the massive jump from the minimum to the recommended. That's such a huge jump that I think it would justify going from barely running the game at low settings and low resolution to 1080p 60 FPS. Because, if we go down to like a 950, right? If we're saying that a GTX 900 series card, so picking the bottom one, a 950, that's 35% of the performance of a GTX 1660 Ti, right? So that would allow us to, if we're assuming the low settings, minimum thing is like 30 frames per second at a low resolution, doubling its performance would get you to, 60 FPS, and then we could increase the settings and resolution, right? Since this is basically tripling the performance from that 950. So that's why I think this is going to be targeting 1080p 60 FPS, maybe not at ultra settings, maybe you're just at medium or high. But the other thing about it is this type of game really doesn't need that high of a frame rate to feel pretty smooth. This is not a first-person shooter where you're swinging your camera around, right? You're just clicking on units, telling them where to go. So I really think that the performance in this game is going to be very good on a lot of systems. Now, if you're somebody who plays Total War Warhammer 2, and you're familiar with your system's performance on that game, I will caution you that Warhammer 3 is seeming to have significantly stepped up system requirements. So even though they are quite low, the older game here is only asking you for a GTX 770 for its recommended GPU. And its minimum was going all the way down to an Intel HD, and they specified at 720p that time around. Now, a GTX 770, for example, if we compare that to the 660 Ti, so a 770 is basically half the performance of the 1660 Ti. So, and also the 770 wasn't actually even performing all that well from what I can tell in Warhammer 2. I decided to look up Warhammer 2 benchmarks, and there wasn't a lot there with the GTX 770. I found this video. I don't know this YouTube channel, but I did find it. I'll link them in my description for credit. But if you look at the gameplay here, it's not hitting 60 frames per second. It seems to be mostly in the 40s and 50s, even dropping into the 30s sometimes, on that GTX 770. And again, this is Warhammer 2, right? You see what I'm saying? So yeah, also I saw another benchmark of this. This was like a short 30-second video. GTX 770, the other one wasn't telling me what the graphics settings were. But I did look up this one, which did tell me the graphics settings in, I think, Spanish, and I took Spanish 1 a few times. Long story on that. I promise I didn't fail it. But anyway, I took Spanish 1 a few times. I believe this says mostly maximum settings, is I think what that's saying. So at mostly maximum settings, they've got this frame rate counter up here. Might be a little bit hard to see, but they're basically getting 30 frames per second. And I'm assuming this is 1080p, but again, I'm working with the benchmarks we had here. So here's what I'm getting at. The previous game, Warhammer 2, had a recommended GPU that seems to be only good for 30 frames per second at mostly maxed out settings. The new game is recommending that you double that performance on your GPU, right? It's recommending double the performance. And so that would tell me that either they've doubled how demanding the graphics are, right? To where this would just, you know, our new game with the 1660 Ti would only get us 30 frames per second at nearly maxed out settings, like the old recommended card. Or this could mean that instead they're actually doing a more modern recommendation where on modern PC systems, usually people are happier with a 60 FPS, whereas in the past, a lot of times things were recommended more at 30 FPS. Given what the game actually looks like from what I've seen, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't look kind of nice. These aren't really like actual gameplay shots, but I don't know. I'm not convinced that the graphics settings and the engine have advanced to a point where the demand should have completely doubled compared to Warhammer 2. So again, it's my speculation, but I think that that the Warhammer 3 recommendation here is probably 1080p 60 FPS at maybe not the completely ultra settings, but at least at pretty high settings. That's what I think anyway. Now, just to wrap up here, they don't recommend any particular processors, so apparently they're not too concerned about the processor. Any Intel i3 or Ryzen 3, they're saying is fine for minimum, and for recommended, you'd get a few more cores if you were on an i5 or a Ryzen 5, so there you go. The memory situation, even at recommended, is only 8 gigabytes. This is another reason why I don't feel like the engine is super updated and super demanding. They also mention, though, that if you are using the integrated graphics, that you would want at least 8 gigabytes of memory, because an integrated graphics chip is going to be sharing system memory. So that's why you would want more than if you had a graphics card that had its own dedicated video memory. And they're also confirming this would work all the way back onto Windows 7, if you had any questions about that. And it will be a large install, so 120 gigabytes of available space. So while the rest of the system requirements here seem very easy, you do need some hard drive space for this one. You guys gonna be playing this? Let me know what you think in the comments section. I hope all of you have an excellent day.